Russia's legislature is similar to ours here in the United States. Here in the U.S., we have 100 members in our upper chamber, which is called the Senate, and we've got 435 members in our lower chamber, which is called the House of Representatives. Over in Russia, they have a parliament. It has 166 members in their upper chamber, which is called the Federation Council, and they have 450 members in their lower chamber called the State Duma. One of the members of the State Duma is a man named Mikhail Yemelyanov. He's saying that Trump's airstrike in Syria this week may lead to nuclear war with Russia. He said, quote, "This act goes far beyond just Syria because clearly Russia supports the legal Syrian government and takes part to a certain scale in this conflict. Therefore, such strikes are an act not just against Syria, but also against Russia. Moreover, when Americans were striking the airport, they didn't know if our citizens were there or not. So this situation may lead at least to a repetition of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which almost pushed the world onto the edge of a nuclear war." All right, so he also made a fair point about the chemical attack that took place in the Syrian town of Khan Sheikhoun on April 4th. This is what he said, quote, "It is all lies. There was no chemical attack by government forces. Chemical weapons were taken from Syria a long time ago, and the Americans know this, because they were transported under their control. This is an excuse for the U.S. to interfere in the Syrian conflict directly." All right, now before anyone criticizes me for listening to what a Rusky has to say on the matter, I'll tell you this. I researched his claim about the chemical weapons and found out for myself that he is exactly correct. His claims are corroborated by both the United Kingdom and the United States. On the 23rd of June in 2014, the BBC published an article titled "Last of Syria's Chemical Weapons Shipped Out." The article says this, quote, "The last of Syria's declared chemical weapons have been shipped out of the country for destruction," the international watchdog OPCW says. OPCW stands for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, okay? So the article goes on to say this, quote, "The chemical cargo is being shipped to a specially modified U.S. naval vessel, the MV Cape Ray. The destruction of the most toxic agents will take place on board at an undisclosed location somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea. The remaining chemicals will be destroyed in Finland, the U.S., and Britain." So we have confirmation that Bashar al Assad, the president of Syria, allowed the international community to come into Syria and take all of his chemical weapons. These weapons were then turned over to the United States, which took them aboard a U.S. Navy vessel called the MV Cape Ray. All right, let's set that aside and go to a statement by the White House. On August 18, 2014, the White House published a press release. That release was entitled "Statement by the President on the Completion of the MV Cape Ray of the Destruction of Syria's Declared Chemical Weapons." Boy, that's a long title. This is what the statement from the White House said, quote, "Today we mark an important achievement in our ongoing effort to counter the spread of weapons of mass destruction by eliminating Syria's declared chemical weapons stockpile. The most lethal declared chemical weapons possessed by the Syrian regime were destroyed by dedicated U.S. civilian and military professionals using a unique American capability aboard the MV Cape Ray, and they did so aboard the U.S. vessel several weeks ahead of schedule. This is a major milestone in the international community's efforts under the leadership of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, to rid the Syrian regime of its chemical weapons. It further advances our collective goal to ensure that the Assad regime cannot use its chemical arsenal against the Syrian people, and sends a clear message that the use of these abhorrent weapons has consequences and will not be tolerated by the international community. Okay, so there we have it. An official statement by the U.S. government that Syria's chemical weapons had been destroyed. And not only were the weapons themselves destroyed, but the facilities that had been used to create the weapons, those were also destroyed. If we go back to October of 2013, the Washington Post reported this, quote, "Syria has destroyed its declared chemical weapons production facilities," international inspectors said Thursday. The article also pointed out that in October of 2013, the OPCW directly inspected 21 out of Syria's 23 sites, and they were able to verify that the other 2 sites had already been abandoned and there was nothing going on. So folks, Russian or not, Mikhail Yemelyanov is absolutely right in saying that chemical weapons were taken from Syria a long time ago, that the Americans know this because they were transported under the Americans' control. The truth is, the Syrian government had absolutely zero reason to use chemical weapons this week. None. Show me one person in the world who can come up with any rational argument for why Assad decided, after all that he had already been through, to suddenly go back and attack his own people for no apparent reason with chemical weapons that the USA and the international community had already taken away from him, knowing that if he did so, he would be inviting war from the United States. Now remember how all of this started. The USA was hell-bent on invading Syria and toppling the Assad regime way back in 2013. Obama had come out with that famous red line speech saying that the USA would invade Syria if Assad used chemical weapons. And wouldn't you know it, next thing you know, there's a chemical weapons attack in Ghouta on August 21st. Despite there being zero evidence to prove that Assad had carried out the attack, the Obama administration immediately started trying to prepare for war. They said that they were not going to even need a constitutional declaration of war from Congress. And at the time, Congress was actually, some of the legislators in Congress were threatening to bring impeachment hearings up against Obama if he did this without them. So Obama was definitely gunning for war. Fortunately, there was a journalist who asked Secretary of State John Kerry if there was anything at all that Assad could do to avert this coming U.S. invasion. So Kerry pompously replied this, quote, "Sure, Assad could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons, but he isn't about to do it, and it can't be done." So after Kerry said this, what did Assad do? Assad said, "Come on in. Send your international inspectors in. Take the darn chemical weapons. We aren't using them." So that put Kerry and Obama over a barrel. It was a huge humiliation for them. So the next month, in September, the USA and Russia negotiated a deal called the Framework for Elimination of Syrian Chemical Weapons. The deal required Syria to allow international inspectors to investigate the stockpiles in Syria and to look for any kind of other chemical weapons, all of which had to be destroyed by mid-2014. And that's exactly what happened. By the way, a full investigation into that Ghouta chemical attack was done, and it was determined by the international investigation team that there was no evidence that proved that Assad's forces had carried out the chemical attacks. None. The investigation team published a report on their findings which said that the chemical weapons had been fired from 5 different locations around Damascus. And they put in their report that they had discovered that all 5 sites were under the control of the rebel opposition forces, not under the control of the Assad regime. The investigation team also said that the rebels were seen moving various munitions in and out of each site, suggesting that it was the rebels who had staged the chemical weapon attack to frame Assad. Let me give you a direct quote from the report. This is what they said. "The 5 sites investigated by the team had been well traveled by other individuals prior to the arrival of the mission. During the time spent at these locations, individuals arrived carrying other suspected munitions, indicating that such potential evidence is being moved and possibly manipulated." I don't know about you guys, but to me, the fact that the Obama administration was racing into war with Syria based on this supposed attack, chemical weapon attack by Assad, an attack that they had no way of knowing who had committed it, whether it was Assad or his enemies, that tells me that the whole chemical weapons story back in 2013 was really just an excuse to justify war. And it should be very alarming to us all that this is exactly what is happening in 2017 under Trump. It's a repeat of the exact same scenario. Given the fact that the Trump administration knows that all of Assad's chemical weapons had been destroyed, and knowing that the last chemical weapon attack turned out to have been carried out by the rebels, not by Assad, you'd think that this time around the U.S. government would be a little more careful, a little less quick to go in guns blazing. But no, Trump struck the Syrian army with cruise missiles before any investigation could be done. They didn't send in any teams. No international teams went in to find out what happened. Plus, the Trump administration, just like Obama's administration, they are refusing to give the public any evidence so that we can judge for ourselves if Assad is guilty. And all of this craziness is being carried out with full knowledge that we are likely going to have to fight the Russians and the Iranians as well if we go in after Assad in Syria. The fact is that this is all just smoke and mirrors. It's the same pretext that was used to get us into the Iraq War back in 2003, 2004. The U.S. government told us that Saddam Hussein had these chemical weapons, that we had to invade Iraq to save the poor little children from a vicious dictator. How many times are the American people going to fall for the same exact war propaganda? These are false flag attacks. They are not being perpetrated by Assad. The American people is being manipulated with mass mind control techniques using graphic and emotionally traumatizing images of little children foaming at the mouth. They are using these images in the mainstream media to manipulate us psychologically and emotionally to get us to support and go along with another war. A war that benefits the oil corporations that want to go in and put that pipeline in through Syria, which is what this is really all about. You people who want war with Syria are stupid, weak-brained imbeciles to fall for this crap all over again. You people are a danger to America. Shame on you. You're nothing but a bunch of useful idiots who are being used like pawns in a game that you don't even know is being played. Wake up. Wake up and join the rest of us who learned after 9/11 that there is no depths to which our government will not sink to achieve its satanic one world order agenda. Wake up, America. We are on the brink of nuclear war. Get out there to your town halls, scream at these morons who represent us in Congress, and tell them that we will not allow them to drag us into World War III. They can wave the American flag and talk about patriotism and how we have to save little babies all they want. We will not be manipulated into war again. For the End Times News Report, I'm Jake Morphonios.